Welcome back to Matt's Automotive Channel. Today we're going to replace the front control arm bushings with these polyurethane bushings. And if you've watched any of the previous videos, you'll know that I've went ahead and I've checked all the bushings in this car. In fact, we ended up replacing the axle bushings in the rear. And the front ones, they look pretty good. They flex a little bit, but they're supposed to. They're supposed to absorb some of that energy and lessen the transmission and VH into the car. So you're probably asking, well, then why am I doing this? I'm obviously not going to track this thing. It's a V6. It's not that powerful. But one of the things that it's doing is tramlining. And if you've never heard of tramlining, you've probably experienced it in the past. And that's when you're driving down the road and you're on a road where a couple of ruts are worn, by either heavy trucks or vehicles, and there's, a dip on each side where the tires are. And anyway, you drive into these ruts here, and then the car will start pulling left and right, back and forth, and that sort of thing. Well, that's what this car does. I did replace the steering rack bushings, and it did help significantly because we did have a fair amount of play in the steering rack. But even though it's been improved significantly, we still experience that tramlining. And I know we're probably not going to be able to get rid of it completely, but I think we can improve upon it. One of the problems is this is a 245 tire. I don't believe these came stock with this car. And oftentimes when you go from a narrow tire to a wider tire, you start experiencing things like that. So I think we probably won't be able to eliminate it completely. But what I think is when I get into one of these ruts and the car starts to ride up on top of the rut, I have to correct the wheel. And I think I'm correcting the wheel because of the play that's in these control arm bushings. I think the wheel, even though I'm holding the wheel straight, this wheel here kind of gets cocked sideways a little bit and starts to go up. And so I'm always playing with the wheel. So the hope is that by replacing these bushings to eliminate that additional flex and then help reduce that tramlining that we're experiencing on this car. I mentioned some of the advantage of having the polyurethane bushing. So why not just put these on all rigs? Well, it's going to depend upon your application. There are some downsides to the urethane bushings as well. Basically, if it's a track-oriented car or you want the precise handling, yeah, these are the way to go. However, the downside is that these are not maintenance-free like the rubber bushings. Reason being is that these are greased bushing and they require grease every couple of years. If you don't grease them, you're going to end up with some squeaking and squawking and some additional noise that you probably don't want. So you got to maintain these things. Also, you're going to have more NVH, noise, vibration, harshness, transmitted from the outside of the car to the inside of the car. However, with the bushings for the control arms, it's kept pretty minimal. Unlike things for motor mounts, transmission mounts, and some other components where you get more of that noise transferred in here. Anyway, the reason these things turn up squeaking is, well, obviously this is not like a watertight seal, and dirt finally eventually gets in there. But anyway, this you got this outer shell here and this inner sleeve here. And these things are designed so the bushing actually rotates around this. So it kind of hinges here. And you get this, the grease that comes with it, and it's very thick, tacky grease. And it lasts for a while, but it eventually works its way out. And also dirt eventually works its way in here. And as that happens, you start to get some wear and some squeaking and that sort of thing. So about every 1 to 2 years, you have to pull this assembly apart and clean it all up and then re-grease it. That's a huge downside to these things. But if you want that precise steering and feel when you're tracking the car, it's probably a good trade-off. Also, another thing is if you have a vehicle that goes off-roading and that sort of thing, you're probably better off sticking with rubber bushings. Again, dirt and water is going to get in here and then start to destroying these things early. And again, with the rubber bushings, the rubber is actually bonded. You got the rubber bonded to the outer shell and also the inner portion. And so there's no place for any dirt or water to leak in there. And so you're not going to end up with a squeak. Eventually the rubber will tear, degrade, crack, and tear, and then you eventually have to replace it, but they last a good long time. So anyway, if you're off-roading, probably better off to stay with the rubber bushings. So anyway, with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Let's start by getting the wheel off. All right, to get this control arm out, there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points that we need to remove. One is going to be the ball joint down here, the sway bar end link here, and of course the 2 control arm bushings right back here, and one over here. All right, let's get the brake off next. Be sure you hang the brakes and don't let them dangle from the line, as it could damage it. And then let's remove our pads. Let's remove our caliper bracket. I can lift our rotor away. Now remove our sway bar end link. Now let's remove the one on the other side to make it easier. Removing this side takes all the load off of it, so now we can just swing the whole arm up. Now we can just go ahead and tap it off. Now we can go ahead and remove the strut mount nuts, but not the bolts yet, because this is kind of the dangerous part. Before you take these bolts out, you definitely want to support the underside of this control arm, because if you don't, the spring is just gonna rocket this thing out and you could potentially get hurt. So be very careful at that point. But let's get this off in there. Now that we got the underside of this arm supported, now we can go ahead and remove those strut bolts. Now it's separated. Now we can go ahead and
get 11, 10 then. That should be that.
Now let's go ahead and remove the spring. There. Now this is one of the things I kind of wanted to show you. Was that these rubber bushings kind of load this control arm. See how it bounces back? That's because this rubber is bonded both to the sleeve and the outer shell here. So this is also why it's important with these type bushings to only tighten them down once the suspension is loaded. And just remove the whole control arm along with this knuckle. I know I could remove the ball joint, but I may damage it, so I'm not going to go that route. Okay, this here is an 18 mm. I already pulled the cotter key. So, all right, so let's go in here and break these loose with the breaker bar. Okay, now with the tension off the bushings, the arm just swings down real easily. And then we can just go ahead and remove these bolts. Here's another typical Ford dilemma. You try to pull the bolt out and it hits another bolt. So we're probably gonna have to remove this one to get this one out completely. And there's a good chance that we're gonna have to remove or loosen the steering rack to get this one out too. All right, I did end up having to remove the bolts on the rack here and then move it out so I could get this bolt out. That one's now out. And now we should be able to just drop the whole thing. And there we go. All right, and then I hit this with a little bit of WD-40. Use this for either penetrating oil or something that's gonna make it a little easier for these bushings to be pushed out. All right, when you push the bushing out, if you don't support this, this tends to get squished together. So what I did is I cut a bolt about the width of this, which is about 1.5 inches, and then thread this out to expand it, and then get in there real snug. So now, with this being supported, we should be able to push the bushing the rest of the way out now without damaging the control arm. FYI, I have a fairly good kit here. However, the largest ring here will not go over the diameter of this this bigger bushing here. It will fit over the smaller one. So I'm going to have to go to the hardware store and get some pipe. It's a larger diameter. It'll fit over that, and then cut it to length. Also, the standard ball joint remover will not work. I have to use this extra long one. If you compare the two, this is a standard one, and you can see the difference in size. So definitely you need a longer one to make this work. All right, so let's go ahead and finish setting this up. Again, this will go on this ring over here on the outside that we're trying to push it into, so there's a cavity for the bushing to fall into. And this cap will push on the outer side of this bushing here. And then we should be able to continue pushing this in without collapsing it, because we got the bolt in there now. All right, we got it all set up here. So let's try to take it the rest of the way out. All right, for the larger bushing, I didn't have the proper size. What I needed was a 3-inch outer diameter, and this is a little less than that. So I ended up just getting a hole saw and using that in place. This is a 3.5-inch hole saw. So anyway, we'll give that a try and see if it works. Okay, before we push in the new bushing, or the new shell anyway, let's go ahead and clean up the inside for the control arm here. So it has a nice clean surface to be pushed into. Okay, so we're going to push the bushing in here as far as we can by hand. We'll use this guy and then this cut with this attachment on the back side. All right, now let's just go ahead and push her in. Oh, wait, one more thing. Just so we don't crush this side here, we want to put in our little spacer again here. Now let's zip her down. All right, now we have the other bushing set up, so let's go ahead and run that. Whoop, I forgot the spacer again. We definitely need that spacer in there. Still running. Okay, here we go. All right, we got it pressed in. Now we can go ahead and push the bushings in. So let's first of all grease everything up pretty liberally here. Get a lot of it in here. There's these little grooves. You definitely want to make sure that you get lubricant in there, because that's what's going to continue to lubricate it after it's installed. It'll hold that grease in there for some time. We also want to lubricate the outer edge of this as well. Okay, and we get ready to push it in. Okay, now let's just go ahead and run the bushings in. Okay, now I can run the other one on. Now, before running the sleeves in, note that they're different sizes. You got 2 short ones, 2 longer ones, and obviously they correspond to each of these bushings here. So make sure you have the right ones before pushing them in. Okay, so let's go ahead and push them in. Okay, the sleeves are fairly easy to run in, so don't even need attachments for this. Now before installing this back in the car, I want to take a little bit of this lube and then get around the sides here with the bushing where it's going to be rubbing up against the K-member. This should just be another potential place for it to squeak, so just make sure that it gets lubed. Alright, the torque spec for these is 148 pound-feet, and unlike the rubber bushings, you can torque these to spec with the suspension unloaded, and that's because these things actually rotate. They don't stretch like the rubber bushings. So anyway, let's go ahead and get this torqued in now. Okay, now we can go ahead and put our spring back in. Make sure it has the proper orientation here. There's a little dip here, which coincides with the very end here. And there's two holes down here. The last one here is not supposed to be covered. The second one is, according to the manual. Okay, then put the tie rod back in, torque to 27 pound-feet, and then keep turning the nut until the castle nut lines up with the hole, and put a cotter pin back in. Now that we have a new cotter pin in, we can stop on this side now, leave the sway bar unhooked, since we'll need it unhooked on the other side, and we can just repeat this process on the other side. All right, just to let you know, on the driver's side, I did have to disconnect the steering shaft to get the steering rack out far enough to clear this bolt here. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and put that back now. The torque spec for this bolt is 30 to 35 pound-feet. And for the steering rack, these get torqued down to 39 pound-feet. All right, tie rod's back in, torque to 27 pound-feet. Then go ahead and put a new cotter key in. Now we can go ahead and reattach the sway bar. Now we can put our rotors back on, followed by the caliper bracket. And then these bolts are going to get torqued down to 85 pound-feet. Now we can reinstall the brake pads. Now we can go ahead and reinstall the caliper. And then we can torque these bolts to 24 pound-feet. We'll just get the wheels back on and then we're done. All right, car's completely done. I just got it back from a test drive, so let's sum things up. It's not exactly what I expected in terms of noise, vibration, harshness, or NVH. But it's everything that I expected from the handling standpoint. It tracks so much better. Tramlining is almost non-existent now. Much, much better. It's a real toss-up as to which way I feel about it. I love the way that it handles now, great, but I don't know for a daily driver if I could put up with the noise. It's a constant roar that you hear from road noise. Maybe the tires would have a lot to do with it. If you got better tires, maybe it would transfer less, but nonetheless, it transfers a lot of noise. Also, if you're on a bit of a rough road, things tend to shake and rattle in the car. I hear some things in the glove compartment that are rattling around that wasn't there before. Personally, I think if I were to do this again, I would go with the OEM bushings, just get some brand new ones and get the worn ones out of there and maybe sacrifice a little bit of the handling. But if you track your car or do anything performance-wise, definitely go with the urethane bushings. They are much, much better. So anyway, let's conclude this video here, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.